I feel a rant coming on. So today we're going to be talking about some squats, and a common issue that we see with a lot of lifters that walk in outdoors here at Melbourne Strength Culture, being coached by people who don't understand the idea of sitting back into a squat correctly. And they quite often get cute to sit back with a big chest or sit back chest up. Where this begins to bring about some problems is that instead of sitting back and loading their hips and hamstrings with a neutral spine, what ends up happening is they sit back, and in an attempt to sit back and maintain their chest position, they'll sit back and arch their lower back. This brings about quite a few significant issues, particularly at the front of the hip and how the hip actually articulates with the femoral head inside the acetabulum, but then also how the lower back is supported with our intra-abdominal breathing and our bracing strategies that we employ before we actually move through our squat. If I can get this camera set up, holy moly. So this probably looks familiar from our other video that we shared on breathing and bracing. However, I'm just going to quickly go on this again. In order to correctly stabilize the lower back, we need to set our pelvis and our rib cage directly on top of each other. This allows the diaphragm to draw a big, nice breath of air into our lungs. And as the diaphragm draws down, this pushes force or pressure out against our ab wall. So this is the correct way to breathe and brace in order to safely load the spine through squatting. So we need to have the pelvic bowl directly underneath the rib cage so the diaphragm can draw down. So that's rule number one when squatting. So now we're going to start moving in towards why, when we sit back, why that actually could be an issue if you're incorrectly sitting back. So here we have two stick figures. We're going to call them Joe and Brad. We can see here Joe is in what we'll typically call correct alignment. He's got a pretty natural kyphotic curve up top, and then his lumbar spine is also lordotically curved in a pretty normal manner. His joints are all stacked, and he looks happy. This is happy. Joe's happy. Over here we have Brad. Unfortunately, Brad is stuck in his excessive anterior tilt. So we can see Brad is sad, but also Brad's pelvis is not directly underneath his rib cage. So when his diaphragm tries to draw down, it has nothing to support its action and then create pressure that pushes out. His diaphragm doesn't function correctly in this position. Whereas Joe over here, because he has his pelvic floor directly underneath his diaphragm, when Joe breathes in deep, we're gonna create that pressure that we want, that intra-abdominal pressure, in order to stabilize the lower back. So this is the first step in understanding why sitting back incorrectly and arching is the incorrect way to load a squat. So then if we start to take a closer look, and we'll go down into the actual hip joint itself. So if we zoom in on this point here, this is what we start to see. So the leg bone comes up, the femoral head, and the femoral head sits inside the acetabulum of the pelvis. So it sits inside its own socket here, because it's a ball and socket joint. And when we move into a squat, so when Joe's knees start to come up, the femur here begins to move through flexion. So this femur is going to start moving up towards the top of the whiteboard here. As we can see though, the femur eventually is going to run out of space because of the way that the joint is actually structured. So the femur is going to run into the acetabulum eventually, and this is where we start to get some impingement pain at the front of the hips. So a very specific point. Sometimes it can carry over into a couple days post squatting, or sometimes it can even come about when we've just been sitting in a flexed position for a long time. So that's looking closer into Joe's position. But then if we move closer into Brad's position, so again, we're going to zoom in on this point. we can see that because his pelvis has dumped forward, his acetabulum is actually also going to be rolled on top of the femoral head even further. So now we start to see that Brad here is going to run out of space a lot quicker than Joe will. Brad is going to run into that lip of the acetabulum a lot faster than Joe will. This is significantly going to impact Brad's depth. He's not going to be able to squat deep, pain-free. So Brad is going to run into a whole lot of issues purely because no one has addressed this position on Brad yet. So now we're starting to see that a neutral position is far more advantageous in order to squat, one, safely because we can create more intra-abdominal pressure, but number two, safely because we're not driving that femoral head into the lip of the acetabulum. So if you're someone that sits back into your squat, but you seem to get a little bit of lower back discomfort or pain or some anterior hip pain, the take home from this is all you need to try and do is set a better rib cage and pelvic position, so a better core position, and then set that with a nice big breath in to create some intra-abdominal pressure. Once you have that pressure set, your goal should be trying to maintain the pressure as you move through the squat. If at any point you kink or you arch and that pressure dissipates, you've lost the position that we've just talked about. So all you need to do is set a better ribcage position. Pelvic bowl comes underneath the ribcage, so we're closing off the scissors at the front. We're closing this down. We're breathing in. And then you're initiating your squat with more of a hinge as opposed to an arch. So the squat will look like this. Breath in, set the pressure, small hinge to load the hips, and then we squat. As opposed to this, set the position, breathe in, intra-abdominal pressure. I've now lost that pressure as my pelvic bowl and my rib cage have moved away from each other. I then now try and squat. I struggle to hit depth. I feel some pinching here and some tightness here. If we managed to help you out here in this video, make sure you give us a big thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. You can find us on all our socials and our website down in the description box below. Thank you for watching, happy lifting, and welcome to the culture. Struggle to get depth, definitely. Back with a hinge. Initiate your squat with a better sit back as someone that feels. So if you're someone that tries, so if you're someone that sits back into your squat, fuck.